April 6th, 2020. I'm going stir crazy. Graham seems to get stronger every day somehow. It's like she's stealing my youth and thriving in isolation. This may end up being a record of me going insane with her stories mixed in. Let's go sit out on the porch. It's a nice day out. I'm tired of being cooped up in here. I concede that I could use some fresh air, but make her promise not to go near the neighbors or anybody walking by on the street. She gives me an entirely too sarcastic scout salute and swears she won't. Alright, that's better. Feel my battery recharging already. Now, the moon church was what I was telling you about yesterday, right? That was some crazy shit. So, Apollo 17 found this crazy structure that was just perfectly built. Strangest architecture I've ever seen. Made no goddamn sense to anyone how it remained standing after all this time. So we trained some other crews to go up after and look into it further. Specifically, we got a few people trained that had degrees in anthropology and ancient cultures. Maybe we could find some links here between this and things that have been found on Earth. Well, naturally, nothing is ever that easy. They hit up there in 1973, land smack next to the structure found by the previous mission, and get to it. By this point, technology has thankfully improved, so we have cameras in their helmets that allow us to see everything they see. They were in color too, thank God. I asked her how they had this kind of tech in '73 when a lot of things were still incredibly basic with video, especially transmitted over that fast of a distance. Pfft, you really think the stuff you saw from that time was the most advanced technology being used by the government? Don't underestimate the amount of money American government will throw at something if they feel it's a threat. The cameras and equipment we had on those missions was on par with that little video camera your mama gave me for Christmas a few years back. She's talking about the GoPro she got 4 years ago that records in 4K. What the fuck? Now she's laughing at me again. Like I said, don't underestimate government spending. So anyway, Apollo 18 was a 3-man crew. Jason Voss, Ben Cott, and Arthur Wayne. Wasn't too happy about Arthur going up there. We had spent a few months together while he was training down at Cape Canaveral. God, if he could do half the things he could do in our gravity up there. If only I could edit my memory the same way I do this transcription. So, they got to work. Jason stayed in orbit around the moon, making sure everything on the main ship was fine. Arthur and Ben went down to the surface and set up base camp. There was the structure, and not even 100 feet away was their little landing pod set up with everything in it. They were equipped for 3 days on the moon. First day goes off fine, just walking around the thing, taking measurements and samples. They determined that most of the structure is made of an unknown element. To this day, I don't think they found out what it was. So, end of day 1, and they go back to their base camp. Now, we have a couple of cameras set up in the pod so we can see everything going on, just in case there's any issues technically, or God forbid, something happens between them. Arthur and Ben are both fast asleep. We've got the feet playing in command just to monitor and keep an eye on everything. And suddenly, it glitches. Not a drawn out one though, just a quick scramble, then it's back. Arthur and Ben are still there asleep. Now there's a figure standing there in the airlock though, like nothing I've ever seen. Long limbs, big hands that almost look like bulldozers, and just a rounded off knob right at the shoulders. I hit the intercom speakers for the capsule as fast as I could move, screaming at them to wake up. Poor Ben fell straight out of his bunk and onto Arthur underneath him, belly to belly. Now, that's something I normally would have paid to see, but right now my heart was racing for the wrong reasons. So they both scramble up and look towards the airlock. That damn thing is still just standing there. I think it was looking at them. Arthur shouts at it, asking what the hell it wants. There's this low garble of noise that happens. Nothing discernible. It could have been interference for all we know. But by God, I saw Ben's face drain of all color when it happened. Arthur went a bit slack, looking from Ben to the creature. Then, as fast as it showed up, it was gone. Poof, right into, well, guess you can say thin air, being where it was. Ben sat on Arthur's bunk and just cried. It took him a good hour to actually calm down. In the meantime, we had no idea what was happening. Finally, he chilled out enough for us to ask him what happened. He said that thing had looked at him. No eyes or anything, but he knew it was looking at him. It said,
"She was never meant to live."
Now, this shook all of us. Almost a month before the mission, Ben and his wife suffered a miscarriage. She had been 6 months along. They were expecting a little baby girl. Then one day, the baby was just gone. No heartbeat, no activity. They didn't know what had happened. It tore Ben and his wife apart though. They had a huge fight a week before liftoff because she didn't want him to go. Didn't want to lose another person she loved. I can't imagine what he felt when he heard that damn thing talk. They cut the mission short after that. Everyone was afraid of what may happen to Ben's mental state if anything else happened. They packed up quick and got the hell out of there. Ben drank himself stupid afterwards. Ended up driving his car off the interstate, going 150 at around 3 in the morning. They barely got anything to bury. Graham wipes a stray tear from her eye. A man is jogging down the street with his dog, coming closer to our house. Graham calls out a greeting to him. He walks up and begins talking, much to my displeasure. Graham is speaking animatedly and leans down to pet the dog. I remind her we're supposed to be distancing just to be safe. Sorry, Jerry, my grandson here is a hard ass. I'll see you some other time. Anyway, that was the end of Apollo 18. Not a whole lot found out, but we were ready to try again. I was just grateful that Arthur made it back in one piece. We were actually engaged, you know, way back in the day, before he went back up on the 19th mission in 74. I was a bit surprised at this. As far as I was told, Graham had never been married, and my grandfather had been killed in a car accident not long after she found out she was pregnant with my mother. We spent a lot of time together during that time. It was lovely. I miss that man. So, Arthur and Jason volunteered to go back on the 19th mission. I think Arthur was determined to get into that structure and see exactly what was going on with it. They had a new recruit along with them as well, Paul Orson. He was a former Green Beret during the Vietnam War. Tough son of a bitch, and not one for conversation. They didn't know what they would find though, so they wanted someone with combat training to go up. Everything goes as normal. It's old hat at this point. They land in the same spot for base camp. Arthur and Paul this time. They got there on day 1 and set everything up, then decided to just rest up for a few hours and go straight in. Well, they didn't realize that they needed to find a way in first. Apparently, in all this time researching the structure, everyone just assumed there will be a door somewhere. No such luck. Every wall on the outside was smooth, no cracks or seams signaling a door. They searched every goddamn inch of that thing, nothing to be found. Lo and behold, I'm watching in on Arthur's camera while he's walking around the structure. Even in low gravity, he had 2 left feet. He tripped and fell straight to the wall. We thought we had lost him for a minute. It looked like the camera had hit something and shorted out. Then he asked us if we were seeing it too. The interior of the structure was larger than the exterior, way more room to move about. Lights hung in the air like stars, bathing everything around him in a soft glow. It was like its own miniature galaxy contained in that one building. Probably one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Arthur backed out then, wanting to make sure he could travel freely in and out of the structure before he got trapped there, but it seemed to work fine. It was like there was a portal, a thin veil where it looked like a wall but wasn't. He grabbed Paul, showed him what he had found. I don't think he was too impressed, more like he was ready to shoot it if he could have found a gun. Exploring it further, they found a small spiral slope, almost like a ramp that went downward from the main chamber. They followed it for probably an hour before it got anywhere, seeing more of those strange symbols all over the walls on the way down. When they got to the bottom, it was like some kind of church. No idea what they worshipped or who, but there was an altar right there against the far wall. A statue rose up in a recess behind it. Looked to me like an elongated pyramid of sorts. Not really sure how to describe the geometry of it. There were angles that merged with smaller angles, curves where lines were. It was like my brain was trying to comprehend it through the camera feed, but just jumbled everything instead. That was about the time we noticed the spots on the altar. We're not 100% sure to this day what it was, but we had a good enough guess. It was dried. It had obviously been there for quite a long time, but it still had that rusty red color that only comes from dried blood. It was splashed all over the place there, like someone had slit the jugular and waved all about up there. Had to have been gallons spilled. That was enough for the two men for that day. They headed back up to base camp to make record of what they found and go back to sleep. They were out for maybe 2 or 3 hours when it happened again. The camera glitched, just like last time, and that thing appeared. It wasn't in the airlock this time though. It appeared right next to their damn bunks. We tried warning them, but it didn't seem to work. It's like our speakers were jammed. We were only able to watch in terror. That thing leaned over Paul and said something to him in that garbled noise we heard last time. God knows what it was. Then it was gone again. Nothing there. Paul got up and started putting on his suit to go outside then. I kept hitting the button, trying to ask what the hell he was doing. Got no response. Our line into the main capsule was dead. When he had the whole suit on, I tried the line going directly into his helmet. I said, "Paul, what the hell did that thing say to you?" You know what he told me? I shook my head in response. He looked straight into the capsule camera before stepping out and said, "Finishing what they began." I still get chills thinking about that. It was one of the coldest things I've ever heard. By that time, Arthur had woken up and was getting his suit on as fast as he could. God, I begged him not to go after Paul, not to go into that damn church. Whatever was done in there before was bad, and there wasn't going to be anything good coming of it now. He was too good of a man though. He got everything on and chased Paul in there. No idea how he had moved so fast, but Paul was waiting down there for him already, standing right on the altar and holding an old combat knife. Arthur shouted at him, asking him what the hell he thought he was doing. He didn't say a damn word. Just started lunging towards Arthur, brandishing that knife. I watched it. All of it. Each of their helmet cameras was on a different side of the big command screen, Our coordinator was shouting at me to tell them to stop, to get their shit together. It wouldn't have done anything. That wasn't Paul in that suit anymore. There was a blind rage in his eyes. His breathing in the mic was like an animal that had been cornered. No, he wanted to kill and didn't care who saw. They went back and forth for a while, throwing each other all around that unholy place. Finally, Arthur managed to wrestle the knife away from Paul. He stood up, holding it out in front of him. There were tears in his voice when he was talking, telling Paul to stay away, telling him they could go back home and have a drink. Act like all of this never happened. It didn't matter. Paul rushed, and Arthur had no choice. He ducked down and thrust the knife upward. The camera in Paul's suit was splattered with thread as he depressurized in seconds. Arthur screamed, looking at that altar and throwing the knife at it. He just lay there for a while, sobbing and shouting curses. He was alone up there. Graham's voice cracked. I've tried to transcribe the next part as best as I can, but some parts were difficult to make out. Arthur started pulling Paul's body back up towards the exit with him. Even if he had tried to kill him, he wasn't just gonna leave him up there, all alone on a rock. He got to the top and tried to go through the wall back outside, but it was suddenly solid. No give. He tried the other walls, trying to make sure that he wasn't using the wrong one in his emotional state. Nothing. Still no way out. He collapsed against the wall, taking in deep, shallow breaths. His oxygen tank had only about 10 minutes left by his count. The suits weren't designed for long outings back then. I hit the button to talk to him and try to soothe him. He was almost hysterical, but I like to think hearing me helped him go quietly. I still remember seeing his face in that helmet camera. My last words to him. The little smile that he got right before he passed. He got to know that even though he was dying up here, on a mission completely off the books, there would be part of him still living. There would be part of him still living on, right here on Earth. Graham wiped tears away from her eyes. She had been openly sobbing, obviously reliving something painful. I put my hand out for her to take. The last 3 missions they sent up there served 2 purposes. They were recovery missions to get those bodies back home and give them a proper burial, and demolition missions. They couldn't get back through the wall into the chamber the normal way, so they tried drilling through. There was no chamber though, just solid rock no matter how far they drilled into it. So they gave up after that. The next 2 missions brought explosives and detonated them around the structure, destroying it. We haven't gone back to the moon since then. Not after that loss. Even if we had, I wouldn't have worked the mission. I would have absolutely refused. I told them I wasn't taking on any more crewed landing missions after that. They would have to find another communications head. She stared at me for a moment before looking back out toward the sky. The moon was already hanging there, right at the cusp of night. She let out a long sigh. Some nights, I look out at the moon and like to think he's still out there watching over me. Watching over us. He would be so proud that I'm finally telling someone this. He had always talked about having a family and grandchildren one day. I think he's up there right now, giving that sly grin he always had. I'm sure he's proud of you, wherever he is. Graham looked for a moment more as I sat there, stunned. Then she got up, gave me a hug, and went back inside to get ready for bed. April 7th, 2020. I'm going to try to give Graham some space today. She still seems a bit out of it after last night. She stayed up to watch the pink moon. Says she felt better after seeing it. Like Arthur was at peace up there. April 8th, 2020. She's back to her normal self. Well, look who's finally up. Thought I was going to have to draw a pentagram on the floor and summon you down here. Grab me that loaf of bread off the table. I've never wanted a grilled cheese this bad before in my life. Alright now, let's see. Did I tell you about Skylab yet? God, that was a clusterfuck if I ever saw one. They want you to think it just decayed out of orbit, but they knew what they were doing. They made sure that son of a bitch went down in flames. She settles in with her sandwich and another glass of wine. I don't know where they come from. I only saw one bottle on the counter when I got here, and I don't recall getting any with the grocery delivery. I swear, she's some sort of a witch. So, we had about 4 crews up there that did different experiments and such. We had your normal run-of-the-mill stuff, working on plants and small animals, zero gravity, blah blah blah. Then, the final crew came in. I about marched my ass down to the science department and smacked the shit out of every one of them when I saw what they brought up with them up there. It was a goddamn block. Not just a block though, it was a piece of debris from the temple on the moon. They were still trying to figure out what the hell it was made out of after all this fucking time. So, they're up there poking and prodding at it, trying to hit it and see how it reacts. These idiots don't have a damn clue what they're doing. They leave it in the lab one day after they're done, and the next thing you know, it starts growing right in front of us. It's just expanding, growing outward and inward, taking over the entire compartment in Skylab. We don't understand how it's been in storage for so long and it just now starts to do this. Maybe it was the proximity to the moon or something. Maybe whatever they were doing to it. I don't know. That thing took over half of the station by the time 24 hours had passed though. Graham gesticulates wildly, stretching her arms out to show some measure of what had happened. So this thing is turning the station into a new version of the moon temple. There's protrusions coming from it, odd angles sloping off here and there. It looks demented. They thankfully hightailed it out of there on the main shuttle right after it happened. The structure just kept taking more and more of it as it went. The cameras inside were still giving off a feed. That's the weird part. No matter how much this thing took over and reshaped all the metal and tubing of the station, the cameras kept going. We saw the small galaxy from right there in the lab. The crew quarters ebbed and changed, stretching until they resembled a hall of worship. That damned altar appeared at the end. The very same one. That was what sealed the deal for the superior officers. Skylab was obviously a lost cause. We didn't know how long this thing would keep growing up there, or where it would latch onto next. So they started working on sending a probe up there, carrying a payload. They were going to knock it straight out of orbit, either let it drift off into deep space, or burn in the atmosphere. The whole time they were doing this, we were watching the cameras. I saw things on there, things that weren't meant for the human eye to see. On occasion, the feet would blink, and the altar hall would be filled with a writhing mass, Creatures that looked like that same one that appeared on the moon. They would be feeling, swirling around one another in a throng. It was some worship ritual or something. I don't know. Just as soon as it started, it would blink right back out. There were other creatures, masses of darkness, tendrils of light stretching from them. They didn't seem right for the space they were in. Like they were somehow larger than the station, yet microscopic. They devoured one another with no care. It was its own contained environment up there. Finally, the payload was read and sent up. We watched the feed as it hit, blowing a hole in the lab before knocking it into a decaying orbit. The warship started again, more frenzied this time. They were excited to be going to Earth. A crew was dispatched to clean up any wreckage that could be found. Not entirely sure what they did with it, but I hope it's buried as far as it can be. She finishes the glass of wine she had, getting up and hobbling towards the sink. She started the water and began to wash dishes. From then on, I think we made it a point to make sure all the testing and such was done in a more controlled environment. They started sending out more probes too. Voyager was launched a few years later. We wanted to see what was beyond our little space in the galaxy. There's a lot, that's for sure. I remember when they told us Voyager had reached the edge of our solar system. We couldn't believe something had gotten that far. We looked in at some of the pictures it had taken along the way. There were the usual things that inspired awe. The stars, planets up close, far-off comets and asteroids. Then, there was the follower. She shuts off the sink and comes to sit back down. Creepy little shit that thing was. Looked like a human male, honestly. Kind of tall, scrawny. He was naked head to toe, not wearing a goddamn thing. She notices my look. Before you ask, no, it didn't have a dick. It just followed the Voyager like a lost little puppy for a while, poking and prodding at it occasionally. We got plenty of close-up pictures of it, saw right into its eyes. The close-ups were what made us realize it didn't have eyes like a human. Instead, it had stars. They burned hot, almost causing a flare on the pictures. There was one where it opened its mouth, and you could see a void like a black hole, singularity and all. She shakes her head, letting out a little shudder. The weirdest thing was the message it transmitted. Perfect English. Sent it through the Voyager's onboard microphone as a microwave signal. When it came through and was translated, it said, "So nice to meet you. I'm a bit early, but I'll be seeing your planet soon enough." That wasn't even the scariest thing Voyager picked up though. Right before I retired in '99, it started sending back a message. Took forever to decode it because everything was so scrambled. After all that time, it was still a mess. Some language we didn't understand and a cipher to go along with it. It was like someone had done a rush job translating. What did it say? Turn back before it notices you too. Graham said she wants to go get some air. I notice she's taking more time than usual to move, like it's hurting her. I ask if she's okay. These old bones are better than you'll ever be. Now, I'm going for a walk. We'll finish this up tomorrow. Evening of April 9th, 2020. Graham asked to sit on the porch and watch the moon tonight. Says this is the last of her stories. Can't believe I've been retired for 20 years now. Seems crazy at this point, leaving the job, helping raise you kids. It was worth it though. You turned out okay. She gives a little chuckle here. So, there's two more things that happened right before I quit. One is a direct result of the other. Care to hear? I nodded. So, in '97, we put the very first rover up on Mars. We started it, looking to see if it could support life up there. You know, trying to expand out beyond our own planet. Hell, it's already too crowded here. Has been since man first walked. Best thing about this social distancing is I have an excuse to tell people to fuck off. Pathfinder was something though. Ugly little contraption. You wouldn't think it could get 10 feet, much less across a barren planet full of dust and rocks. But damn, that little thing moved. It was zipping here and there across the land, taking pictures and videos, scooping up samples and analyzing them right then and there. Wonder of science. So, we're looking at all these pictures being sent back, amazed at everything we're seeing. There's huge sand dunes, cliffs. This place is like a giant desert, but it's beautiful. That was when the first storm moved in. Storms up there aren't like ours. There's no rain, just wind and lightning. The wind stirs up the sand and makes it hard to see, blocks out most of the light. So, Pathfinder is up there, sand and dust swirling around. Then, in a flash of lightning, you see this towering figure. It was thin, incredibly tall. Everything about it was disproportionate though. It wasn't until the next flash of lightning that we connected it. It was another one of those damn things from the moon. The ones that appeared when Skylab turned. This one was so much bigger though. At least 10 times the size of the first one we saw. When this one spoke, we all heard it. It wasn't some garbled mess of noise this time. It was plain as day. After it happened, we all realized that we hadn't heard it out loud though. But in our own minds, each one hearing the same thing. The temple will live on. We ruled and shall rule again, worshipping amongst the stars. Then it was gone along with the storm. Never saw one as large as that again. Haven't seen any of them since then actually. Pathfinder didn't have any other encounters up there the entire time. And as far as I've heard from the folks that are still working there, they haven't found anything else out of the ordinary. NASA made it a point to contact the other countries and tell them about the temple at that point. Naturally, the Russians already knew about it. The bastards. Turned out, they had gone up to the moon at some point and found the ruins of the temple up there. Took some of it back with them, and ended up having it lose all kinds of control back in '86. A lot of lives got lost up there because they didn't know what they were fucking around with. They were experimenting with it in some underground lab when it went out of control. But of course, what's their first reaction when a fucking space temple and those damn things show up in their backyard? They nuked the thing straight to hell, killing a ton of their own citizens and covering up some reactor meltdown. The footage they showed us, I'll never forget it. These bastards didn't even nuke it right away. That's why there was so much fallout. They let it go on for at least a week, absorbing everything and recording what happened. There were people inside that altar room when their worship session broke out. Those poor souls deserve so much more mercy than anyone could give them. After all, we all agreed that our first priority was protecting the Earth from whatever this was, not allowing any of that back down here. That was the time they started on the space station. Now, I don't know much of what they've been up to recently. They built it to keep a better eye on things out there in the orbit though, where they could conduct experiments and run some countermeasures right there without anyone here on Earth being any wiser. Smart move, I think. I know now. Long before I left, they had a satellite that found that chain of bodies again. The same one that took the first man crew up there. We could hear the whispers being transmitted back. I still wake up some nights hearing those whispers. What did they say? Come to us. Be sacrifices. Float eternal as a living altar to them. Them? Beats the hell out of me. Maybe it was that big thing they saw in the photos. Maybe that's what the temple was built to worship, or whatever we were warned about by the follower. There's so many things we still don't know about what's out there. Probably things we will never know. It's all just lost in the vastness of space, never meant to be understood. We're still here though, that's something. So they've been keeping us safe until now. Maybe it's something else though, watching over us. The moon was out in full on the horizon now, shining bright as it rose further. Graham got up and walked out into the moonlight, looking upward. I know you're there, Arthur. I know you're watching over all of us. You stayed up there because you were a stubborn old bastard, thinking you had to do everything to keep people from seeing what you saw. I felt you the other night though. That full moon, you were there. We're going to dance in the moonlight together again. Real soon. I love you. Graham tells me she's going to stay out here for a while. I'm going to go up and start transcribing all of this. Maybe get some actual relaxation in. I'm tired of being stuck in this damn house. Graham was dancing around in the moonlight as I walked back inside, humming "Fly Me to the Moon" to herself as she did. April 10th, 2020. Graham passed away early this morning. I had walked into the kitchen for a drink and noticed the front door was still cracked open. This wasn't normal for 2 in the morning, so I walked out to check. Graham was sitting in her rocking chair on the porch, drenched in bright moonlight. She had a smile on her face. She died peacefully in her sleep, carried off into the moonlight by the one she loved.